In honor of National Women's History Month, we invited a handful of women to Waffle Wednesday over at EDCO yesterday and ended up having our largest Waffle Wednesday ever in terms of number of people. Thanks to those of you who made it and brought your friends. Tonight, even with Julie being under the weather, we have two exceptional women that are no strangers to entrepreneurship. Our moderator, Luann Abrams, is the manager at Ben's own startup accelerator, Founders Pad. And Luann has been an active mentor and resource for early-stage companies in Bend for quite some time now, and a particularly strong champion of women-led businesses through her work with STEAM. Luann will be speaking with Maggie Hubbell, VP of Operations at Customer.io, a company I care greatly about, and former CEO of Agency Revolution, which just last year was taken through a successful strategic acquisition, that company along with 30 of the employees. This is a process she compared to getting a college degree in 60 days. So I'd like to bring up Luann and Maggie.
There's one.
Thank you, thank you. Sure, I can move that, okay.
Don't worry, Brian.
Hi, Maggie.
Thank you for making sure I'm not alone up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here for you. You know that. So thanks for being here and being willing to share your story with everyone. Let's start off with how you started down your professional path.
So shortly after college, I started working for an e-blast advertising, AKA spam company. And the target market was insurance agents. And so that actually, it was a great product. People really loved it. And then, they passed the Spam Act.
No more
so
spam.
We decided to shut that down. And then I started working for a coaching and training company in the insurance industry. And just kind of kept evolving my roles there. I led a sales team. I did operations. I did basically whatever was needed. It fluctuated, but generally about 20, 25 employees, and so just learned about a lot of different things along the way, doing different roles, and we were always very technology focused. So we had an email service, or for example, for our clients that we just offered as a benefit, and we saw a need in the industry for what we didn't know at the time was called marketing automation.
Okay.
So we created a platform for our customers. We actually ended up launching a new company. We ran both companies concurrently for a while until we decided to merge the two.
And that became Agency Revolution.
That became Agency Revolution.
And what was your role as you became Agency Revolution? What were you doing there?
At that point in time, I think I was operations manager, and I officially didn't start off with Agency Revolution right away, but there were a lot of shared resources between the two companies, and so I saw pretty quickly that they needed some help, running the company. So I just kind of stepped in, and it went from there.
Yeah. And was this a company that was funded? Did you bootstrap it? What was that like?
We went through the painful experience of always being bootstrapped.
Okay.
So whether that was good or bad, I don't know, but we didn't have to, when we had our exit, we didn't have to share it. But it certainly had its pain along the way.
So how did you become CEO?
So our company had been growing for a while, and we were also going through some major transitions. We had originally licensed a third-party software that we were selling, and then we built some technology on top of it so that it was very specific to the insurance industry. And we decided at one point to also build our own software. So we were running the legacy product, paying for a development team, and building the new one at the same time. We launched it, and it was very popular. it was adopted very quickly. We were making a lot of sales. And it was pretty clear that we needed to just have some really strong direction in the company. The founders were, had been around for a long time, and the CEO at the time, he'd been there a long time, and it was a little bit unclear exactly who was in charge. Like, was Maggie in charge? Because she's kind of doing most of the CEO stuff.
Okay.
Or is the CEO in charge? Because he's not really doing most of the CEO stuff, but he was providing a lot of value. It wasn't a question of him, going away or anything like that. Mm-hmm. There was some tension around that, which I think is really natural at certain stages in the company. And fortunately, we had a very good relationship, so we were able to talk about them and be transparent.
How did that conversation go?
Yeah, so there was...
Or was it a series, maybe, of conversations?
It was a series of conversations. So it was becoming very clear that we had a really big decision to make, which was, let's go down the path of seeking, a large funding round, or do we look at selling? And so when you have such clarity that you have, a very specific path that you need to choose, then the leadership needs to become very clear as well. Mm-hmm. So I knew that this was a direction that we probably would need to go in, and there was a small incident. It was minor, but it was an example of something that showed that there was a real lack of clarity on who was really leading the company. And so when that happened, I just decided, fuck it, I'm gonna have this conversation like right now.
Yeah.
So I asked the CEO like a few hours later, after I kind of thought about how to have the conversation in a really humane way. I asked him if we could meet, and I talked about how the leadership in the company was confusing and that I needed to be the CEO.
And what was his reaction?
I know it was difficult, but within about a minute, he said, okay.
Okay.
So obviously, we had a lot of trust, and he believed that I could do it.
And it continued to be okay after that, after you actually started taking control and making more decisions?
It had to be an ongoing conversation around, boundaries and who was delivering certain messages. And I think it probably was a little bit hard for him to let go, but overall we did manage it pretty well together.
So how did you make that final decision that instead of taking on capital to grow, that you were going to look at an acquisition?
So there were a lot of different factors at play. And as we just worked through a lot of different scenarios, and we, once you get to a certain size, you get phone calls and emails all the time from people who say they, want to buy you or invest in you or whatever, and you ignore most of them because, they're constant. It's like spam. And one of them caught our eye, and we thought, what, this could be a good opportunity. And honestly, we'd been in the business for a while, and some of us were a little bit tired. Mm-hmm. And so we took that into account. It wasn't, I don't think we all agreed in the end on what to do, but there were some mixed feelings about it. So this particular opportunity, we had criteria. Like if we were going to consider anybody for this, they had to be good people. They had to take care of our team, and it had to be a fair deal. And initially, I don't think they thought that it would be, a very strategic acquisition, but they saw that there were a lot of elements in our company that would benefit theirs and vice versa, and so it became a very strategic acquisition for them, and that meant we could get more money. And so it ended up being a really good fit for all of the reasons that I just mentioned.
So once you decided this was a company that you wanted to work with and go down this path, what was that like?
What was the acquisition like?
Yes, what was the acquisition like?
I think we talked about how it's like getting a college degree in 60 days. Well,
Okay.
I was naive and I didn't know any better, and I said I wanted the deal done in 45 days, damn it. Like, let's get this
Like
done.
a house.
I did not want the team to be totally off track for that long, and so, I didn't know. I've never I've never sold a company before, so I thought, you know what, 45 days, we're going to do this. And that was a little insane. And from what I've learned, this company actually required more documentation and supporting materials than is maybe normal. So the amount of material we had to get together to be prepared was pretty crazy. I had an ops team working with me like around the clock. Like, I'm so grateful for the dedication that they gave during that process. They didn't have to, but they were right there with me the whole time. And then, certain people end up becoming so important during a process like this. So my CPA was like, we talked all the time. Wes Price, I don't know if he's in the room, but if you guys know him, he was great.
Yep.
In this situation. You're talking to your lawyer like every other minute. You're managing your stakeholders. So you're managing other owners. I think there were 5 of us. You're managing the emotions of them, the fact that everyone has different opinions, they want different things. You're managing your staff and how they're feeling. We definitely let them know that we had somebody who is a potential financial partner. We weren't clear up until we signed the LOI what that would even look like, and then at that point we couldn't talk about it. So we tried to make sure that we shared as much as we possibly could, but they were in the dark too, so there was a little bit of stress there. And everybody is just going through different things when you have an experience like that, including your family.
Yeah, how did your family handle this time? Because clearly you were crazy busy. I know you're married, you have young kids, you probably weren't as available to them. What was that like?
So I was not as available, and even though I maybe acted like I was completely emotionally unavailable. So, you're working so many hours, and it's really stressful because there are things happening like every day that could kill the deal. It's like there's just stuff constantly, and it's unexpected and out of the blue, and that's not something that your spouse or your kids can really understand. And so, yeah, it was hard on them. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I knew that we would either, kill the deal and we'd find another path, or it would be done. But the stress was for a limited period of time, and that was probably harder for other people around me to see. But yeah, there was light for me.
So tell me what the actual negotiations were like.
I could hear you. So what were the actual negotiations like? If I wasn't so emotionally tied to it, it probably would have been kind of fun, actually. The way that they started out, though, was interesting. So we actually didn't have like the price in mind that we knew that we were going to ask for, or not settle below that. And so the first step was to, we had some numbers in mind, but we wanted to feel out from them what they had in mind. And so my one request of our former CEO was, do not throw out a number. And he did. And it was like really, really freaking low. So we were all on a conference call in different, like I was in Portland, I think. We couldn't see each other, and I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, how do I fix this? Like, how do I get this to not go further? So I had to make sure that the conversation didn't have any sort of, sense of agreement at the end of it, and then think, how do we fix this? And I did. So we managed to get the price up, quite a bit from there, and even more than I actually thought we would. So that was like really constant back and forth. You're having these casual conversations that you have completely planned out in advance. Like, you've gone through all your talking points, you've called your advisors, and it may feel spontaneous, but like you've got to like think through all of these pieces, because these conversations are the difference between millions of dollars. So, no pressure.
So at some point during this, you weren't only negotiating the price of the company, but you were trying to figure out your future. with the company as well. Were you going to stay on? Were you going to leave? What were next steps? What was your thought process through that?
Yeah, so this company was, so they were owned by a private equity firm, and they were purchasing other software companies in the insurance, financial services, and legal space. And so initially it was like, oh, we'll kind of be our own little subdivision and, kind of run independently. And it seemed like, well, that could be cool, run a company that I already love that's not bootstrapped, like have money, like to, spend a little extra on, like that could be cool. But we had so many like parallel products and opportunities to really merge our products together that it became clear that we were almost more like a merger than anything else. And so that meant really combining the team, and the plan was for me to stay, and it just became clear over time that there wasn't a spot for me that I would be excited about. And fortunately, they didn't tie me in. And so I left.
And did you have to negotiate a severance, or did you just say, I'm out of here?
Yeah, so initially, and they kind of came to the same conclusion of, we'll have a job for you if you want, like whatever job. I think maybe marketing. I thought, that is like not, I just ran a company. I can't do that. It wouldn't be, it's just not the right place for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I'd be that good at it either. Mm-hmm. So it became pretty clear there wasn't a spot. And I said, I think maybe we just part ways. Yep. And I felt like a huge sense of relief, but I also thought, I should get paid. Absolutely. So I know that, there was money out of the acquisition, but to me, this was different. Like they were, they didn't have a spot for an executive that isn't just going to go get a job tomorrow. Like that, takes some work. So they initially offered me something that was not adequate, and so I went through another sales experience and fought really hard to get a little more.
So then your thoughts turned to what's next. So what were you thinking as you left your company?
Like, holy shit, what am I going to do now? Mm-hmm. So it was definitely a chance for me to do some exploration, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that it needed to be something I was excited about. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about consulting. I thought about, hey, there's a lot, maybe there's a startup opportunity, or maybe I work for a consultant agency or get a job. And it was definitely something that I talked to a lot of people about, and people in this room, actually. I explored some interesting opportunities that I probably would never have considered before, and so I did learn a lot about myself, and I did then eventually come to the conclusion that I did want to find a job and work for another company, but that it had to be the right fit. And so I decided, okay, the right fit is that it's something that I will love and have some autonomy, can contribute. I want to live in Bend, and I want to get paid fairly. And that's not easy in Bend.
No.
In fact, people who believe in me and love me and have a lot of connections here thought, that's really awesome, Maggie, but I don't think you're going to find somebody to pay you fairly. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I have this many people supporting me that don't see it either, mm-hmm. I was actually feeling like a little defeated by that mentality that's here in mm-hmm. Bend sometimes. So I just decided, screw it, I'm just gonna stick to my criteria, and I just told myself that story like every day, like I'm gonna find these things. Yep. And I ended up actually finding something pretty awesome. So my friend Carrie Baldwin, she has a contact at the company I work for now, and she saw an ad. Actually, they were actually advertising for Maggie. They didn't know it. But it was for a VP of operations position at a growing software company in Portland. And so I read the job description, and I was like, oh my gosh, they want somebody who loves operations and strategy? Like, this doesn't happen. So I applied and did hours and hours and hours of interviewing and ended up getting the job, and that was 4.5 months ago. And I love it.
So what's it like working for somebody else now?
I knew you were going to ask that.
It's an obvious question.
Somebody else in the audience told me that if I wasn't asked that by you, they were going to ask it. So it's not that hard of a question to answer.
No.
And I had this very transparent conversation with my CEO last week, actually.
Did they ask you this in your interview, I'm wondering? Like, you're going from a CEO to a VP. How is that going to affect you?
So I'm sure in some ways it was a point of concern because, you're taking somebody who's not used to really working for somebody else and maybe thinks they know everything. And our CEO is a first-time CEO, so it was probably hard for him to understand that dynamic as well. It was one of the very first questions that he asked me at the interview.
Yeah.
And my answer is my goal was not to be a CEO. It is not to be one now. It's to do something meaningful and something that's going to fulfill me. And maybe that's being a CEO again one day. I don't know, but that piece is not really the most relevant part to me.
Right.
That being said, I have had to figure out how to work for somebody, which was a little harder than I thought. And it wasn't about do I not want to have a boss? It was, how do I have a boss? And, our company lets people work pretty autonomously. And so for me, finding the balance of I'm just going to go do stuff and him needing his employees to have some autonomy, but also, informing him or collaborating with the right people. So I would say there were a couple weeks there I was am I going to be good at this? But I think we've gotten to the point where we're really, the CEO and I were really comfortable with each other. We have a really strong, growing leadership team, and I think we're hitting our stride. And I'm being challenged in a lot of ways, so I'm enjoying it.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. So the tech industry is going through a revolution right now. We've heard about stories of harassment of women and the disparities that has caused. What has that been like for you, being a female CEO? And not only that, you're a fairly young one. So have you had any obstacles related to that? How do you think that affected your career and what you've done?
So I think we all run into little things all the time, and unfortunately, actually, we get used to it.
Yes.
And so sometimes we don't even notice it. But what I've chosen to do is, like it or not, be an example sometimes. So, I lead a Women in STEAM committee here in Bend. I try to really participate in certain things and be an example when I can, because I'm willing to be, and I'm able to be. And sometimes that means doing, hard things that we don't want to do, like speaking here tonight. So I feel okay, I should get up there because there aren't that many women up here on this stage. So I should just do it. So I try to put myself in those situations, hoping it makes a difference.
Did you ever have times of doubt and lacking self-confidence that you dealt with in any way?
Besides every day?
Yeah. You don't seem like that.
I'm trying to tell myself the story that I don't in hopes that it will become true. But yes, of course. I think that's actually something that all CEOs probably experience, and especially women. And so, that's...
Any tips on how to deal with those creeping, nagging thoughts?
Rewrite your story. So about a little more than a year ago, actually, I'd been in the CEO role for a few months. There was a lot of change ahead of us, and I couldn't sleep. I was pretty stressed out. I couldn't sleep. And so I thought, you know what, if I'm going to be awake at 4 in the morning, why don't I do something useful with these hours? And so I woke up and would just start journaling. And so I just pulled my computer out and would just start just dumping everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I found themes, okay, Maggie, you've got a pattern here. Maybe this is something to pay attention to or work on. And that was a really great way for me to notice my own patterns so that I could work on them. And I'm still doing that, actually. So I've written hundreds and hundreds of pages. I'm not doing a full hour anymore.
That's
actually
a lot.
I could
Yeah.
sleep again. But yeah, it was really helpful for a while and still is.
So now that you've had a little bit of time to reflect on the past year, you've gone through this acquisition process, what would you have done differently? What advice would you give to someone going through a similar situation?
I don't know that I would have done anything differently.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't perfect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it just, everything, we went through the hard stuff and it worked out how it was supposed to.
Good. Great. Well, thank you for sharing your hard-won success story with us. I think we can open up for some questions if anyone has some. Oh, sorry. Bright light, I can't see.
Maggie, what was your favorite part? Tell us about your lessons learned and the hard stuff. What was your favorite part?
What was your favorite part, Maggie?
Of my role at Agency Revolution or?
Position or acquisition or whatever. Favorite part.
Well, I mean, like I said before, if there wasn't so much emotion tied to it, the acquisition piece could have been fun. I mean, negotiating, the stakes were high, so there was a little stress around that. And, like I said, there were a lot of emotions for a lot of people involved, but that could be fun. And there were aspects of it that I did really like. I like working on things that have a long-term impact, but maybe some short-term attention, so I don't get bored. But I like, working on something intensely for a while and then moving on to the next thing. So it probably has some of those qualities.
Another question, Lindsay?
What do you think the balance is as a female in an executive role with emotions?
What do you think the balance is for a female executive between? I'm sorry, between what was she balancing?
Balance between emotions and being a leader. Because I'm a woman, I am emotional, and it's part of my life. And I'm just curious, how do you kind of balance that as an executive leader when you're probably primarily around men?
So balance between emotion and leadership.
So I think there's a few different ways to answer that question. One is that I found the men that I worked with at an executive level were actually far more emotional than I was. So, and that didn't always play out well for them. For me, I do sometimes let myself get emotional, and I think that's okay. I try to be authentic with the people that I work with, which means sometimes bearing my soul.
Jim?
If this were a perfect world, what would you be doing 10 years from now?
If this were a perfect world, what would you be doing 10 years from now?
Well, there would be beach time, but I would probably still be doing something interesting. I do like building things, which is part of why I'm enjoying my role in my current company. Is we are, we're growing. We have, since I've started, I think I've hired 6 people. So we went from 29 to 35. We'll have probably 50 at the end of the year. And to me, that's really crazy and fun. I like the building phase that we're in. We're having to evolve processes and people and product and all these things along the way and kind of invent stuff as we go. So as long as I have some element of that, whether it's my company or somebody else's, that would be fun. Is that a good non-answer for you, Jim?
Preston?
So there was that moment you said, I can be a CEO. Then you became the CEO. When did you actually believe you were a CEO?
When did you believe that you were a
I'm
CEO?
still working on that, Preston.
The second part to that is most CEOs, there's a lot of us in here, feel that that is the loneliest role in the world in business. How did you feel when you got to that position?
How did you deal with the loneliness of being a CEO?
Yeah, so I've called that having the loneliest job on the planet many, many times. And I think what's been so important to me in my career, at many stages of my career, is having a really great group of people around me. And so I have had so many advisors, friends, mentors, including you, Preston. And not having that is, I think dangerous, actually. Like, you absolutely need to have people around you that are supporting you emotionally, and, maybe having a kind of a broad range of people is great. Like, there are those that have maybe been in your shoes before. There are different people that you go to for different reasons, but having that community is just so essential, and it's actually one of the things I really love about Central Oregon is we're pretty good at building that.
So we have time for one more question. I know I saw a hand come up that went down. We good? Is that you, Manny? Talina, last question.
For those of us who don't know, what's your new company? In a nutshell, what do you do?
So what does your new company do?
So we're a messaging platform for websites and apps, and so we can deliver targeted or triggered messaging from basically any type of behavior that you can think of. So marketing, you could call it marketing automation, which is a familiar territory for me. So.
All right, can we get a round of applause for Talina and Luann?